They call me Pastor Dan, so you can call me Pastor Dan, and I serve the Lord at the Union Rescue Mission on Skid Row in Los Angeles. Spent 20-some years ministering doing rich man ministry in San Clemente at the beach, and that was cool. And God did some crazy things in my personal life and in our lives, and now I'm not only ministering down there, but I live at the mission with the men who are in the program. So I'm probably the first person who ever moved to Skid Row on purpose, and so that's a wild thought. And so I just didn't want to be the guy who drives in from Orange County and give people the wrong impression about how I was viewing it. Plus, I needed to build trust quickly at my age. I didn't want to waste time with that, and no better way to do that than incarnationally, living with them. And quite frankly, I needed an education too. So I'm learning a lot, asking a lot of questions on. My role there internally is to pastor the 200 staff members we have, and then externally to work with the pastors and the churches and the organizations in the community to help them as they think through and strategize and mobilize their teams for ministry of the poor in their own communities, as well as helping us down in Los Angeles at Skid Row. Before I get too far into it, I just want to tell you there's good news and bad news as it relates to ministry to the homeless. And it reminds me of these two fellas who grew up together. They were little friends together, and they loved baseball. Their connection relationally was tied to baseball. And so they played at the park together, the Sandlot, and then they played Little League together, and then Pony League, and then they played at the high school together. Then they went off to college, and they both got recruited to play college, and then they went into semi-pro, but they could never make it to the major leagues. And they had this pact as they got older and said, hey, how about this? Whoever dies first, you ask Jesus if you could come back and tell the other person if there's going to be baseball in heaven. And so they agreed. They thought that was a great idea. So at a ripe old age, one of the fellas died. And that night, the other fellow was sleeping, and he heard this sound. Psst, psst. Bill, wake up, Bill. He goes, what is that? He goes, it's me, Jim. Jim, thought you were in heaven. He says, I am. And Jesus said I could fulfill the pact. I'm here to tell you if there's going to be baseball in heaven. He goes, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Well, what do you got for me? Give me the answer. Is there baseball in heaven? And he said, well, I've got good news and bad news. What would you like to hear first? He said, well, why don't you give me the good news first? He goes, all right. Well, here's the deal. There is baseball in heaven. Oh, and he said, there's not just baseball. I mean, the fields are impeccable. The grass is thick, it's green, it smells great. The infield, there's no pebbles, it's always a perfect bounce. The hot dogs, you wouldn't believe how good they taste. The fans come, it's always full, they're always encouraging, they always cheer you, even if you make a mistake. The guys, you're playing with such great guys, your abilities are enhanced. He says, it's just fabulous. He goes, oh man, that is such good news. What could possibly be the bad news? He goes, well, you're scheduled to pitch on Tuesday. So, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is there's over 50,000 people living homeless in Los Angeles. We are the hub of homelessness in the United States per capita. Most of it, or a large percentage of it, the highest neighborhood in the country of homelessness is found on Skid Row, which is 52 blocks just off of downtown. It used to be a dumping ground for hospitals and prisons and other cities. And it's just, it looks like a war zone, quite frankly. And if you haven't been there lately, you should see that. I could give you a tour. We'd be happy to have you come down and see what's going on. It's pretty devastating. People's stories, they come from some pretty messed up situations, a lot of abuse, that's happened to them, a lot of abuse they heap on themselves, and it's just a real fatalistic environment. But the good news is we have a mission there. It's been there 128 years. It is the largest building ever built for a mission in the United States. We have by far the most people we serve in the city of Los Angeles. We are larger than the next 5 services combined. We have 1,500 people living inside our building on any given day, from emergency services for one night to people programming for 2 years. And so we help people transition out of danger into safety, into beds, into apartments, into jobs. On the other hand, the real jewel of the mission is our transformation ministry, because we know that unless you meet Jesus Christ and things change in your heart, really you're just putting a Band-Aid on some cancer, really. And so we have a tremendous commitment as a Christian organization to promote transformation through the Spirit of God. And so we have a program there. We partner with a lot of different groups. We believe in holistic healing, that we believe in the depravity of man. And that simply means not that you're completely depraved, but that every part of you is broken. And so every part of us needs healing. And so we start with meeting the practical needs of folks, providing them sleeping quarters, getting them off the dangerous streets. They say if you live on the street for 1 month, you will create a mental illness from the trauma and the fear and the emotional status that you have. Many people are dual diagnosed with addictions and illnesses that are mental in nature. We have psychologists from Pepperdine. We have attorneys from Pepperdine. We have a medical and a dental facility right on site with partnerships with USC and UCLA. We have a full-scale gymnasium that the Lakers renovated for us. We have a learning center that the Dodgers have provided. We have a lot of great partnerships in Los Angeles. We're reaching every part of the person to heal them emotionally, help them grow intellectually, help them find jobs, help them become self-sufficient. More on that in a little bit. One of the jewels of the things we do is we purchased a 77-acre property in Sylmar, which is north of LA. It's a beautiful facility, and we take any of the moms and their kids who not just want transition, but want transformation. We take them away from Skid Row, because that's the worst place in the world to try to get off of drugs and such and transform your life, is right down there when it's right outside your building. So we take them to Sylmar, and my wife currently just happens to be the director at our facility in Sylmar, at Hope Gardens, and she lives there. She figures, hey, you're not home anyway, I might as well go live there. So she lives with the women in Sylmar, and then Wednesday night is date night. We meet in Burbank and have dinner and discuss all the crazy dysfunction going on around us. And then on the weekend we get together, and we rented our house out down in San Juan, and we have a little place in Anaheim. We hang out on the weekend and get a chance to see our daughter as well. So anyway, I wanted my wife to come up and tell you a little bit about all the good stuff going on at Hope Gardens. So this is my wife, Betty, of 40 years.
Well, thank you, church. It's really a pleasure to be here. And as Dan said, we did the first 2 services, and it really feels like home here. So thank you for welcoming us. We look forward to coming back again soon. Yeah.
You guys have an apartment for us?
Yeah. Well, as Dan said, that God does have a sense of humor. And he had pastored a church down in San Clemente for 20 plus years. We raised our kids down there. And here we thought we were kind of maybe soon going to be coasting into retirement. And God kind of tapped us on the shoulder. And we had been doing ministry up at the URM. Our church had been doing a mentorship program. And Dan had headed that up. And lo and behold, the mission came to Dan and said, would you think about coming on staff up here? And we had to think long and hard about that, but God had already paved the way. And one of the verses I love is that we plan our course, but God directs our steps. And our course is to follow him, and he takes care of those steps, but we just never know where those steps are going to take us. But what we do know is that he's with us. He's with us every step of the way. And so Dan listened to the call of God. I did too. And he moved into the mission, as he said, and he's been there 3 years. And then last year, a position came up at Hope Gardens. And we were praying about who would take on that directorship. And Dan said, well, maybe it'd be good for you to go up there and work with the women. And, while they're looking for a director. Well, I've been there a year, so it looks like it might be a little more permanent than we originally thought. But I have to tell you, it's a wonderful ministry. The women at Hope Gardens, many of them come from the URM. And so we have a rescue mission where they bring in and provide emergency services for the women. But those women who really want to see their lives turn around make a decision to come to Hope Gardens. And Hope Gardens is about 35 miles further north of LA. And we're in the foothills there, and it's a beautiful 77-acre property. And 2 things that women who are experiencing homelessness suffer from is, first, they feel very devalued because of things that have happened to them and decisions that they've made in their life. The other thing is they don't feel safe. And so when they come to Hope Gardens, they can feel safe. It's a quiet place, like Dan said. There are trees, there are streams. It's just beautiful, and they can just kind of catch their breath and be in a place where they can just calm their spirit and their soul, and they feel safe. And then we began a rebuilding, a spiritual rebuilding, because we do believe body, soul, and spirit needs to be renewed. And so we're a faith-based organization, we're a Bible-based, we're Christ-based. And our hope and prayer is that we're going to love them to Jesus, and they're going to come to know him as their personal Lord and Savior. And when they do, they realize that God values them. He created them with a purpose, and life can look different for them. So while they're at Hope Gardens, they go through classes. They have 20 hours a week of classes. They go for 6 months, and that's one of the phases they go through. And then once they finish that, they go into an apprenticeship program. They graduate, cap and gown, and then we began job training for them. So eventually, our hope and prayer for them and their hope and prayer is that they'll be able to transition out with their children, and that they'll have a job, they'll have a home, and life will be different for them because they're making different choices. And it's because they now have a foundation for truth in their life, which we know is Jesus Christ. The other side of Hope Gardens is many of the women that come have not been reunited with their children because of drug abuse. Maybe they've been in human trafficking, domestic violence. Their kids have been removed from their possession. And so we work with them on being reunified with their children, which is a beautiful thing. One of our really success stories, and I'll just take a minute to tell you, is Daisy. And you can go online to Stories on Skid Row, and you can see some of these women's stories, some of the men's stories too. But Daisy came to Hope Gardens about 2 years ago. She came out of addiction, she came out of domestic violence, she came out of prison, and she didn't have any of her children. She has 4 children. Over the course of the past 2 years, she's been reunited with all 4 of her children, and most recently her 8-year-old, who her mom had actually raised from the time he was born. She now has all 4 of her children. She's come to know the Lord Jesus Christ as her Savior. She's in Bible study, she's in support groups, and she most recently got a job at Big Lots. And so she's working full-time at Big Lots, and she's now planning on her exit course, which we'll continue to work with her on that. And then we have an alumni association too. So we really believe in life transformation through Jesus Christ. And so at Hope Gardens right now, we have 250 women and children, 25 seniors, 75 women, and 150 kids. So it is a busy place there at Hope Gardens, and we have youth ministry, we have early childhood ministry as well, because we want the whole entire family to be transformed and to break that cycle of homelessness. So.
Thank you, Ben. Well, I want to take some time to hopefully encourage and inspire you from God's Word this morning on the topic of what do the least need most? What do the least need most? And when I use the term least, I'm really taking a term from Jesus from Matthew chapter 25 when he talked about those who were the least in the community. He said, when you do this for the least of these, you've done it unto me. So it's not a derogatory term. It's actually a term of endearment that Jesus himself used. And the question that I want us to ponder and then look to Scripture for a solution is, what do the least need most? We work with the least. Matter of fact, on Skid Row, if you're experiencing homelessness, Skid Row's like the end of the block. That's the last place you would ever want to be. It's probably the worst neighborhood in the United States. And I'm certain that if you came down there, God would really touch your heart. But what do they really need? And why are they there? What brought them to that place? So we work with the least of these, and I want to suggest that sometimes we make assumptions about what people need, but it's not accurate. What's intuitive is likely not the real need. A lot of people come down and feed the homeless, and it's like, okay, that's nice, but you'd realize they already ate. If you didn't come, they were still going to eat. There's solutions to those kinds of intuitive things. But those are really symptoms. Homelessness is really a symptom. Addiction is a symptom. Those aren't the real problems. We look at it as what we're doing is we work in pain management. Addiction is pain management. People are taking drugs, and they eventually become addicted to them because they're trying to cover up some kind of a pain. There's something that has gone desperately wrong in their life. And then the drug appears to be a friend, and it turns out to be their enemy. And now it's complicated. But what do they really need? There were 2 fellows, and they were older gentlemen. And they had a habit of walking together near the pond every week. So they were walking together one day, and as they were walking along, all of a sudden, they heard this sound. Psst, psst. No, it's not the same story, different story. Psst, over here. I go, did you say so? I didn't say it. They kept walking, psst, over here. And he looked, there was a frog on a lily pad. And he said, psst, pick me up. So he went over there, and one of the fellows picked him up and held him up, and all of a sudden the frog said, I'm actually a beautiful princess. And if you kiss me, I'll turn back into a princess, and I will give you every one of your heart's desires. Every one? Every one. Whoa. He put the frog in his pocket, and they kept walking, and about 20 minutes later, the one fella says to him, well, you going to kiss the frog or what? Reached into his pocket and he pulled the frog out and he said, well, you know, at my age, I think I could have more fun with a talking frog. So you thought that would go somewhere else, didn't you? You know why? Because people's needs are not always what you assume they are. Illustration. There is a national park called Mount Rushmore. Anybody been there? Mount Rushmore? With all the president heads? I think we have a picture of it. Let's put it up there. This is up in the northern part of the country. So this is what it looks like if you were looking at it from North Dakota. And so when you look, and you would see that. It's pretty remarkable. But if you were looking at it from Canada's border, this is what it would look like. You see, sometimes there are things going on behind the scenes you're unaware of that change the dynamic. Some of you are not going to go to Canada and go, it's not there. The guy had a picture. Anyway. In this passage that we're going to look at, and by the way, why don't we turn there now? Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8. We're going to start in verse 40 and read to the end of the chapter. Luke 8. There are two stories, but we're going to combine them because I think that's the way it's supposed to be preached. Luke chapter 8. We're going to look at two characters, what appears to be two different stories, but really are supposed to be related to one another, as we will see. And it's going to answer this question, what is it that the least need most? And I'm going to suggest that we're going to find two things that in this passage that the least need most. Luke chapter 8. Are you ready? We're looking for clues, and I want to suggest that when you look at a passage of Scripture with these two stories, I want you to notice the comparisons and the contrasts, and you'll see that they were designed to be combined so that you would understand what the author really wanted you to grasp. Topic, what the least need most. Verse 40. And so it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Just prior to this, Jesus had gone with his men. There a great storm happened on the lake, Sea of Galilee. He calms the storm. Remember that story? He goes to the other side of the lake. He gets out. He meets this demon-possessed guy. He casts the demon out and goes into the pigs, and it creates a whole big ruckus. And the whole community says, please leave. You're way too radical for us. And you're changing the landscape too much. Please leave. They get in the boat. They come back. They get to the other side, and there's a whole crowd of people waiting for him. You see, Jesus is extremely popular. And in this community, they probably didn't have the Jerusalem Times that came out every morning. Word of mouth was a big deal, right? Their social media was talking to each other. Imagine that. And so everybody was waiting for him. A crowd of people. Everybody wanted a piece of Jesus. Everybody was, hey, can I get a selfie? Post that. Where? And then it says this. We're introduced to the first character. Behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was the ruler of the synagogue. Now, everybody and their uncles there, all the important people, I'm sure the mayor was there, people with business wanted business connections. And then we're told that there's one guy in particular there, and he happens to have a name. His name's Jairus. And we are told what he does. He's the ruler of the synagogue. So in those days, in this community, that's a very highly respected role. That's a very well-educated person. This is a guy who probably is on the top end of what people make. So he's well-to-do. He's well-educated. He's well-respected. He's at the center of the community. Everybody respects this guy. However, Jesus and the rulers of the synagogue didn't get along too well. They were always trying to take him out because Jesus was telling the truth. They said, you guys are a bunch of hypocrites. Well, anyway, for whatever reason, Jairus wanted to meet Jesus. So he is there in the crowd that day. And it's interesting because he not only wanted to meet Jesus, he did meet Jesus. And it's interesting what happened. It says this, that he fell down at Jesus' feet and he begged him to come to his house. He's inviting him to his home. And he begged him on his knees. Why did he want him to go to his house? Look what happens. For he had an only daughter who was how old? 12 years of age, and she was dying. By the way, when you get a specific piece of information in the text, it's the reason for it. It's part of the clue. Okay, and you'll see that in a minute. And she was dying. She's at the point of death, another version says. So she is like day to day, moment by moment, she's going to expire if something doesn't happen. Well, apparently, this guy has run out of options, and he finally hears that Jesus has come. He's heard the stories. Jesus has turned water into wine. He's walked on water. He does all kinds of crazy things with water. And not to have people, he's healing people. And he said, I got to have him come to my house. Well, look what happens. As he went, the multitudes thronged him. So apparently, Jesus said, yes, okay, I'll help you. I'll go do this very important. Now think about it. This is a really important task. Is there anything more important that a person can do than go save someone's life? Pretty important thing he's got going, right? And this is one of the most important guys in town. Most important guy in town, most important thing he can do is save his daughter. This is a big deal. Okay, that's the first character you met. Now, you see all these people are following him too, so there's a crowd of people all the way as they walk. Now we're introduced to a new person, and it feels like there's an interruption to our story flow. But as you're going to see from the clues, it's not an interruption. You have to meet this lady. You've got to compare and contrast the details to see that this is one story. But two things we're going to learn about what the least need most. You see, he was not the least, but she is. Look at this. Now a woman, that's all it says about her. What's her name? We don't know. What's his name? Jairus. Well, what does he do? He's a ruler of the synagogue. What does she do? We don't know. Why? Because she's the least. Who cares? She's not going to help you. You network with her, she ain't going to help you. As a matter of fact, we find out something about her that's actually unfortunate. She has a flow of blood for how long? Oh, that's curious. Do you see the connection you're supposed to make? You're supposed to tie this together. So, the woman has a flow. Now, that's the Bible's way of saying she had female problems for 12 years. Now, ladies, do I have your attention? It didn't say a month. Although that would be bad, right? The men are going, come on, get over it. A year? No. 12 years. She's lost so much blood, she's got to be at the place of being anemic. She's got to be close to death. And she gets this idea. And by the way, if you're in that community and you have a blood flow problem, you are isolated from the community. She could not go to synagogue. As a matter of fact, if she was married, she'd have to leave the home. If she had children, she'd have to leave her children. This woman lived in isolation, loneliness. She was considered an outcast. Nobody even knows her name because nobody cares. And she said, you know what? I heard about this Jesus guy, and she had this idea, if I could just touch him, I think he could heal me. And so it says here that this woman who is an outcast, and by the way, anybody she touches is going to become unclean. That's why she's been isolated. Look what she does. And by the way, you notice that she spent all of her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any. She used to have resources, apparently a lot, and it's all gone. Nobody could heal her. That's her scenario. I got to go to Jesus, last resort. And it says, she came from behind and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her flow of blood stopped. Now, by the way, there's a throng of people around Jesus. She would have had to push and shove her way, crawl between legs, maneuver her way to get, she had to push people around to get to Jesus. Do you see that? Everybody she touches is unclean, including the teacher. Oh. Maybe that's why she came from behind. And all of a sudden, she's healed. That's important to know. As soon as she touches him, she's healed. You would think we could now move on to the other part of the story, but no. Jesus does something curious. He stops and he said, "Who touched me?" And when all denied it, Peter and those around him said, "Master, duh. Everybody's touching you. What do you mean? Peter, he's not the sharpest tool in the box. But he's saying, "Come on, Jesus." And Jesus said, "No, I realize people are touching me. Someone touched me with the intent to be healed, and power went out from me. And I want to know who it is." Now, by the way, when Jesus asks a question, when God asks a question, you think he really needs an answer? You think he maybe already knows? Yeah. He wants something from the other person. And she's worried because she's unclean. But it says, okay, she confesses, "It was me. I did it." And Jesus said, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well." That word well means whole, wholly adjusted. Because I'm going to get you back into society. Because not only do you not only have an issue of blood anymore, but you need to get reinstated with your family. You need to get reinstated with the community. You need to become a productive member of the society. You need to be restored completely. And he said, "Go in peace." The first, and by the way, before I finish that, let me just read the next verse. While he was still speaking, someone came to the ruler of the synagogue's house saying, "Your daughter's dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore." There's some bedside manners. While Jesus is talking with this woman, right, and he finds out about the fact that she used to have resources, she spent them all, nothing happened, and right, they're having a conversation. And while they're having that conversation, somebody comes from the house of the ruler of the synagogue and says, "Hey, by the way, Jairus, give it up. Your daughter's dead." Now, Jesus is on a very important task. It's urgent, it's sensitive, and it's an important person. Why didn't he just keep walking? She was healed. Talking to her after she was healed, and now losing that time, and now the child's dead? That's not very strategic. That's curious, isn't it? You know what it tells me? It tells me the first thing that the least need most. Jesus knew she was healed physically, but that isn't complete healing. You're not healed until you're heard. The people who are the least of these need eye contact. They need conversation. They need people to stop and care. They need people to talk to. They have a story to be shared that's worth hearing. And if you don't give them that, then you're telling them you don't have a story worth hearing. Leave me alone. And we add to this idea that they're devalued. Jesus wanted this woman to know, I'm not just here to heal you. I'm here to make you whole. And that means you have to be heard. We need a relationship. The first thing that the least need most is time. Take time to invest in them. And you know what? That's something you all have. We all have time. But if we don't intentionally plug it into our life, it won't happen. Do you know why? Because that woman's not on anybody's radar. Nobody's thinking of that woman. She doesn't even have a name. That's why they're the least of these. They're scary. They're dangerous. They're gross. They're dirty. They smell. They're messed up. They made choices. Let them live with their choices. Yeah, that's what it looks like from the outside. But that's not how Jesus looked at it. By the way, this is something you have to fight against yourself even psychologically. This isn't just theological. This is psychological. You all did it when you came into this building. We all came into the building. You know what you're looking for when you first get in? If you came from a long way, you're looking for the restroom. But if you didn't, you're looking for somebody you know. You're looking for insiders. Do you realize that we all have insiders and outsiders in our life? The question is, where do you draw the line? And Jesus is saying, you're drawing the line way too close to home. The line should be past the woman with no name. I had this idea, I'd give you a Dixie cup. I'd give somebody in the audience a Dixie cup. And just say, all service long, what I want you to do is take the saliva that comes in your mouth and spit it into the Dixie cup. Then at the end of the service, I want to call you forward and say, now, drink it. Yes, I got a response. Why? See, this is psychological. Watch. What feeling did you have when I said that? Ew, ow, gross, repulsive, right? If you didn't have that response, you need to seek help. See, that's normal thinking. But do you know what it's telling you? Think about this. If I didn't give you the Dixie cup, where does that saliva go? You drink it. That didn't freak you out. You've been doing it all day. What's so different? You know what the difference is? It was inside you. When it comes outside of you, it's psychologically repulsive. That's what we're doing with people. You have your insiders. We all do. And anybody who's not in that group is a stranger. You know why they're strange? Because you don't know them. I don't think anybody walked in the service today, and if you did, you know, you're weird. I just want to meet as many people as I don't know, the strangest people in there, and I want to become their best friend. That's probably not how you think. It's not wrong. I'm just suggesting this is why we have to be transformed in our minds to rethink what we're doing. We must include those who are left out, and you've got to be proactive about it or it won't happen. And that's what Jesus is teaching us. He included her. He listened to her. He made her part of his relational circle. And it restored her. That's how you heal people. You know what we tell the guys in the program downtown? The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. That's not our goal. Our goal is not to get you off drugs. That's a symptom. We're going after the root. The reason people are on Skid Row, the reason people live in the parks nearby you, is not that they don't have an apartment. Duh. And it's not that they don't have a job. Get them an apartment, get them a job. Let's see where they are 6 months from now. There's something wrong in here. You know what it is? Connectedness. People are homeless because they have no functioning human relationships. Otherwise, they'd be with those people, and those people would be solving their problem and helping them. Either those people were the problem, or those people have had to draw a line and said, you know what? This is dysfunctional. They have no functioning relationships. Jesus said it really well. Hey, what's the most important thing in the Bible? Love God, love others. What's the verb? Love. See, if you have functional relationships, you are experiencing love, and it makes you healthy. If you don't know what love looks like, you're going to be dysfunctional. And then you're going to need pain management. Enter drugs. So we got to deal with the pain of the broken relationships. Introduce them to Jesus. Realize you are loved. And you don't have to do anything different to be loved. You already are. that will change how you view yourself, because you treat people the way you view them. And if they're people of value because the God of the universe says so, and they're made in his image, then that changes the entire game. It is love that transforms, not apartments. Do they need apartments? Absolutely. Do they need food? Absolutely. Do they need clothes? Absolutely. And we do all that. But that's not going to break a chain of homelessness, of addiction. Love will do that. And that's spelled T-I-M-E from Functional People. And you're it for your neighborhood. And guess what? There aren't enough Christians participating. LA, it's an urban problem. If you're close enough to drive, you're part of the solution. So I want to challenge you to raise your game here and come join us downtown. We can talk about how to do that. But that's the first thing they need. Second thing they need is in the rest of the story. Not only do they need your time, but look what happens next. When Jesus heard him say that don't bother the teacher, your daughter's dead, you know what he did? He said, don't be afraid, only believe and she'll be made well, whole. So they kept going to the house, and he permitted no one to go in except Peter, James, and John, the father and the mother of the girl. Now all were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, don't weep, she's not dead, she's sleeping. And they all ridiculed him for his opinion of the girl, saying, she's not dead, she's only sleeping. But he put them all outside, took her by the hand, and said, little girl, arise. Then her spirit returned. She rose immediately. He commanded that she be given something to eat. He's very practical. And her parents were astonished. If Jesus knew that if he spends time talking to this lady, that the child's going to die, what in the world is he trying to tell us? Remember Lazarus, friend of Jesus? He got word that he was dying. Jesus, come quickly. You know what Jesus did? He says he intentionally stayed where he was for a few more days, and then he went. When he got there, they said, oh, if only we were here a couple days earlier when we asked you to come, because now he's dead. Bummer. Might as well go home. There's an assumption going on here from everybody except Jesus. And we all do this. Okay, lean in. I'm going to give you a secret. The second thing that the least of these need most, apparently, Jesus knew something they didn't know. And you know what it is? You're never too far gone that he can't heal you, even if you stop breathing. We give up too soon. Jesus intentionally let her die to say, there is no condition I can't solve. There is no person who's beyond the reach of God. These people, they may not come around that you talk, but somebody will. It's entirely possible. God can do that. That's what he's about. Have you quit praying for your lost loved one? Have you given up on these people that you see when you drive by? And they got a sign, or they're in the... Now, that doesn't mean you just do anything and add to the problem. We need to be strategic about how we help, because sometimes helping hurts. But they're reachable. When you reach them, where are you going to send them? They don't know what to do. That's why they're in the park. They're looking, who can help me? First thing people need is time. They need to know Jesus is never too busy for you. Second thing, hope. You're never too far gone that Jesus can't heal you. Restoring hope that the future can be different than the past in Christ. So when you're giving of your time, you're trying to instill hope through that relationship. There's a lady who lived at the mission in our emergency services department. And she was 89 years old, and I got to know her. Most people thought she was a little cranky, and she probably was, but for some reason I just kept coming, and she eventually let me in. And she told me her story. She says, I was 89 years old. I used to have a job as a nurse's aide. I retired. My husband had a great job, but he died, and I just ran out of money. And eventually, 89 years old, they kicked me out in the street. Landlord kicked me out. For a month, I lived on the street. She heard about the mission. We brought her in. And it was a little bit before August. She said, hey, Pastor Dan, my birthday's August 16th. My birthday's a month from now. Then I see her again. She, hey, my birthday's 3 weeks from now. Hey, Dan, my birthday's two weeks from now. Pastor Dan, my birthday's a week from now. And I said, you know, Elsie, what would you think if we had a birthday party for you right here in the emergency services department? She said, oh, that would be really nice. I go, okay, what do you want to eat? She goes, I want something with strawberries in it and a grape soda. And I thought, you know what's funny about that? Really low hurdle. You know, when you have very little, a little bit's a lot. And guess what? On the other side of the coin, when you have a lot, in comparison, giving a little isn't that hard. So I thought, oh, this is easy. So go to Costco, get some cakes, plan this all out, found some strawberry dessert for her, and it's about 10 minutes before the party, and I'm going, oh man, where do you find a grape soda in the world? So I'm going, and I pray, God, I need a grape soda. I'm going through the cafeteria, and I go, I'm going to just check one of these vending machines. Guess what I found? A grape soda. I didn't know people drink grape soda anymore. So I had everything I needed. We go and we had the party, and we had a little dance time. We had a time for people to pray for her, and we had some cake. And then when it was all over, Elsie came up to me, and this is what she said. You ready?
I was very impressed. I never had a birthday party in my life because my father gave me away when I was 3 years old. But this makes me cry. I had that feeling, but it makes me feel good that I had a birthday party. So many people that blessed me. My mama did. The old folks are here. And you were so nice to get this party for me.
You're very welcome, Elsie.
Thank you very much. I'll never forget it, long as I live.
Well, God bless you. And what birthday is this now?
8/17/1926.
Which makes you how old?
90.
Yeah! Did you catch that? My daddy gave me away when I was 3 years old. I'm 90 years old. And this is my very first birthday party. And I will never forget my grape soda and my strawberry piece of cake as long as I live. And you know how hard that was for me? It was just stopping and giving her time and instilling some hope. You can do that. This is the third service. I don't think I told this story. So I'm going to close with two thoughts. This husband and wife were the doctors, and the husband had, I haven't told you this story, have I? There's no psst in it, okay? But, and so he's going to die if something doesn't dramatically happen. And so they're in the meeting, and the doctor says, sir, would you mind waiting in the waiting room? I'd like to speak to your wife alone. She's, okay. So the doctor said to the wife, he said, okay, here's the deal. He's got this really strange disease, and there's only one way we can save him. And if you don't do this, and it's all in your hands. If you don't do this, he's going to surely die. But if you do it, he's going to survive. She says, okay. So she's going to write some notes. You don't even need notes. You'll remember this. Okay, well, what am I supposed to do? He said, here's the deal. He has this weird thing that he can't deal with any kind of drama. He can't deal with any kind of resistance. You just need to say yes, whatever he asks. Anything he wants, you just say, okay, I'll give it to him. You just do that. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, anything he asks, you just say yes. She says, all right, I think I understand. Okay, good. Because if you don't do it, he's going to die. But if you do, he's going to survive. Okay. So she leaves. They get in the car. They're driving home. And about, 15 minutes in, there was nobody talking. And finally, the husband said to the wife, he goes, so, what did the doctor tell you? Did he tell you about my condition? What did he say? She said, well, he said you're going to die. You see, now we know what they need. It's really an issue of will you provide it? Miguel was packing up his suitcase. He was leaving the mission, and we had our first men's conference where we took the guys from San Clemente at the beach and took them to downtown Skid Row, and we were going to do a men's conference together. And somebody told him, hey, there's a men's conference. I think they're giving away a free T-shirt. All right, I'll go. So he goes, and he just has a moment with the Lord. And at the invitation, he came forward bawling, and he gave his life to Christ. He'd spent the majority of his life behind bars for violent crimes. Got out on a technicality. But he stood up in church the next day and said, I was going to pack up. I was going to be checking out of the mission, and then I was going to check out of life. I'd given up hope. But then I met Jesus. You guys came, you gave us your time, and it instilled hope. And he said, I believe that the future could be different. And he finished the program. He got a mentor from our church and developed relationships. A couple years later, he calls me and says, Pastor Dan, could you come to my daughter's funeral? And I go, oh, sure, what happened? He said, well, the baby daddy went over to her house, shot and killed her in front of the kids, and then shot himself. So we went and mourned together and cried together and prayed together and went through the service. And then afterwards, he says, I have a gift I'd like to give you. I go, Miguel, you don't need to give me a gift. He goes, no, I want you to have this jacket. I go, I don't need a jacket. He goes, oh, I didn't say you did. Don't you recognize that jacket? And I said, no, I don't. He said, that jacket is my prison jacket. He said, the old Miguel, when he got the news about his daughter, would have gone and got his gun and gone over to his parents' house. And I realized the parents weren't involved, but if my family suffers, his family will suffer, and I would have shot them both. He said, I'm giving you my prison jacket because the new Miguel has absolutely no interest in doing that. And I won't need my jacket again. Now, generally, you don't think of that as like a criteria for a disciple of Jesus. Oh, you didn't kill anybody today. Good disciple. But sometimes in these environments, that is a step in the right direction, and guess what? Pretty huge consequences for that disciple. But it's all because of time and hope invested in someone. It can change a person. It can transform them. And it'll transform you because the parents were astonished too.